1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, tied vote. I use the casting vote to approve, vote for the motion. It's carried.
Among political tragics,
that's good stuff, isn't it?
The 1996 documentary Rats in the Ranks has a cult following.
And I just happened to leak it to the Herald.
The fly-on-the-wall story of manoeuvrings at an inner-city Sydney council shows politics at its most raw.
If you'd kept Kath on side, you'd now have 5 people voting for you.
Can't even count now. I want to give up.
It also introduced a wider audience to a young apparatchik of the Labor left.
Anthony Albanese.
Despite, or perhaps because, he famously never appeared in the film, though he was supposed to be the fixer at the centre of all the plotting.
But you can't tell Anthony I told you either.
I oppose this bill because I support freedom of choice.
Paul Keating once observed of the now federal Labor leader that he was always in among the mischief of internal party manoeuvrings.
This government has passed 51 pieces of legislation.
Having desperately tried to stop the coup against Kevin Rudd in 2010, he was then largely responsible for keeping the minority Gillard government in office through his deft management of the Parliament as the Leader of the House.
The government Leader of the House, Anthony Albanese, did manage to strike a deal, winning over independent Andrew Wilkie.
The schoolboy who joined the Labor Party, the factional player and the man who said in 2012 he was in Parliament to fight Tories,
that's what I do,
achieved a lifelong dream in 2019.
I have the honour to inform the House that the Australian Labor Party has elected me as its leader.
But as 2021 begins, he faces a too familiar drumbeat of criticism and leadership speculation, this time about his own leadership. There are major policy brawls within the party, for example on climate change, but Albanese's problems with his colleagues are more fundamental. They don't think voters are listening to him, and they are not sure he looks like a Prime Minister. The last Labor leader to win an election from opposition, Kevin Rudd, had built a place for himself in popular culture, on morning TV.
I know you too well, you're grasping at straws.
And campaigned on just a few sweeping promises.
National broadband network.
Including the NBN, computers in every classroom, and ending work choices. Bill Shorten trailed Scott Morrison in voter approval ratings right up to the 2019 election. When Albanese took over, he quickly drew even and overtook Morrison through last summer's bushfires, only for the PM's approval to surge with the government's management of the pandemic. In this context, Albanese is struggling to be heard. He has yet to set out a clear policy platform and has not jumped on issues that resonate with the public, unlike the man he replaced.
COVID's been shocking. People have died, people lost their job, and you've got these pampered sooks who are having a cry.
And when he has intervened, it's sometimes been unclear what the alternative is. The opposition leader is starting 2021 in the limbo land of internal snarking about his leadership, despite the fact there is no clear candidate to replace him and no fixer in sight. Now polling has been leaked suggesting Labor risks losing 2 heartland seats at the next election. The polling was commissioned by union allies of former CFMEU boss John Setka, who was kicked out of the Labor Party by Albanese. One CFMEU organiser used the polling to call for Tanya Plibersek to take over as leader. There is talk of a joint ticket of Tanya Plibersek from the left and Jim Chalmers from the Queensland right. But Chris Bowen, Tony Burke and even Bill Shorten's names get mentioned. All the potential candidates have histories to overcome and also know that taking on the leadership now would be a poisoned chalice. Given COVID means incumbency is an even bigger advantage than normal.
Thank you very much.
Leaderships usually end on a trigger, a bad poll or a gaffe. If the caucus decides it has to move, the so-called Rudd rule, designed to stop the revolving door of leadership, is not considered an impediment. Anthony Albanese, thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you, Laura.
You often ask the question, what's the point of this government? What I'd like to ask you is, what's the point of the Albanese opposition?
To one, hold the government to account, to make sure, for example, during COVID, that the government acted in the national interest. So we advanced issues like the need for wage subsidies, the need to increase unemployment benefits, the need for mental health care to be rolled out, the need to have a plan for post-pandemic, as well as put forward alternatives, which we've been doing on issues like childcare reform, on a future made in Australia, making sure that we have advanced manufacturing and jobs, and a plan to lift wages, lift productivity, and to boost the economy after the recovery.
But do you really think issues like childcare, important as they are of themselves important enough to get people to change their vote in such times of uncertainty?
Well, what it's symbolic of is a plan for the economy. This government doesn't have any reform plan. They don't have an economic reform agenda.
Can you name an issue that Labor has really owned while you've been leader, or where your position is absolutely crystal clear?
Childcare.
That's it?
Well, I can name many of them, but that's one. Wage subsidies. It was Labor that was arguing for wage subsidies to see us through the pandemic. And when we first suggested it, Scott Morrison said that such an idea was dangerous. Increasing Newstart is another reform, a future made in Australia, making sure that we build trains and other manufacturing capacity here. We've outlined a policy for Jobs and Skills Australia. Now, Infrastructure Australia, I created the last time as we were in government as the minister. That transformed the way that infrastructure investment happens in this country. Now, the creation of Jobs and Skills Australia to do for the labour market what Infrastructure Australia has done for the capital market, if you like, is a significant reform.
Are words like productivity, reforms to Infrastructure Australia, Skills Australia, the sort of language that's going to cut through to voters?
Well, what will cut through is a plan for more jobs, is a plan for more secure work, is a plan for cheaper childcare, is a plan for lowering emissions and dealing with the climate, is a plan for recognising First Nations people. There'll be more in coming weeks.
Well, let's talk about Anthony Albanese. I've been quite shocked in the last couple of days by the extent of disappointment and despair felt by your colleagues about Labor's position and yours. They're deeply pessimistic that you can lead them to victory. How is it that you are confronting speculation about your leadership after such a short time?
Oh, look, well, my leadership's secure. I will continue to advance a progressive agenda for Labor. Last year was a tough year for everyone, 2020. But if you look at the position where we're in, going into what may well be an election year at the end of the year, in terms of all the polling, we're very competitive. Most importantly, we'll focus on the people who we need to vote for us rather than focus on ourselves.
Have you let Scott Morrison get away from you? I mean, his net approval rating compared to where it was after the bushfires last year has rocketed, and there's now a big gap between the two of you.
No, not at all. One of the things that we've seen is that because people during the pandemic have wanted leaders to succeed, of course, that has led to an increase in their approval. Because if they don't succeed, then people have been concerned about their health and about their jobs and their standard of living. What the next election will be about is about who has a better plan for the future to deliver a stronger economy, a fairer society, and deal with challenges such as climate change. That's what the next election will be about, and I believe we'll be very strongly positioned for it.
Even some of your closest supporters are frustrated that you don't take advice. Did you consult, for example, on your idea for a referendum on constitutional recognition being held on the 26th of January?
Yes, indeed. I consulted way back in 2018.
But they seem to think that it was a thought bubble and it was a captain's pick.
No, it was in 2018. And it's not put forward as a policy, it's put forward as a constructive idea. How do we have a debate? And it was in the context of people like Noel Pearson has put forward the idea of having 2 days, January 25 and then January 26. How do we stop having every January 26 the same debate each year, but with more and more division? Now, I don't pretend to have the precise solution and that there's a simple solution to it.
People who really want you to succeed despair that the mistrust within the caucus is now back at the levels it was when you famously appealed to your colleagues to stop the internal warfare and instead fight Tories. Is that your problem, or is it something for others to solve?
Well, I just don't think that's right. I don't think that's a right characterisation.
Well, I'm hearing it from a lot of people in the caucus, and not the usual suspects.
Yeah, I don't think that's the correct characterisation. I think that 2020 was a difficult year for the entire nation. We didn't have, Parliament wasn't sitting for most of it. We had people not gathering in the usual way, and anyone who thinks that the current circumstance is like it was in 2013 that you refer to, wasn't there in 2013.
You're proceeding with a front bench reshuffle. What do you hope to achieve with this?
What I hope to achieve is to show what Labor's priorities are. That'll be announced at the weekend, and I'm talking through with colleagues, and I'm sure that it will achieve a stronger team going forward with the right people in the right jobs, and it will be, I think, a positive move.
Somebody made the observation to me that the problem for you is that in finally defeating Bill Shorten and becoming opposition leader, you've achieved your lifetime ambition, and that you seem to lack that burning desire to actually become Prime Minister. That was from a Labor person.
No, my ambition is for Labor to be in government. My ambition has never been about myself. It's about what Labor governments can achieve for the sort of people that I grew up with, the sort of people who need Labor governments. For some people, who in government is a bit of an academic exercise. That's something of interest to them. For the people who really need a Labor government, it makes a difference. And I know, growing up, I know the difference that it made to my mum's life, to her pension, to whether she got the health care that she needed. It made an enormous difference. It wasn't an academic exercise. And for millions of Australians, that's the case today. They need a Labor government, which is why that should be our only focus. Anything else is self-indulgent. They deserve for us to acknowledge the privileged position we're in, and that we have a responsibility to do our best for them.
Thanks for talking to us tonight.
Thanks, Laura.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 7:30's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.